Hello and welcome to this tutorial where I'm going to turn the random prize generator that we made last week. We're going to use the same logic, but I'm going to make it into an Embigginator machine, which is essentially a machine which turns something small into something larger. So we've got loads of great mesh assets within our mesh library, many of which have got a small version and a jumbo version, or multiple steps within there, so small, medium and large cog, for instance. So we're going to use this machine to essentially turn an item from the player's inventory into a larger version of that item. And we're going to do so using the same logic that we use for the random prize generator. Now, at the moment in my game, I'm about a third to a half of the way through the random prize generator tutorial, where I can interact with this machine and it spawns a gun on a locator over here. So it's not doing what we want it to at the moment, but it's essentially got the cornerstone of the logic already sorted out. So we have the inventory already attached to the player. We have a way of spawning from interacting with a machine. We have a way of spawning an item on a locator over here. And so the next step is really for us to spawn the kind of items that we want to add to our game world. So in my game world, what I want to do is essentially turn a small cog in the player's inventory into a medium-sized cog. And then maybe we'll look at doing a medium-sized cog into a big cog using the same machine. So to start with, let's take a look at the gun template, because we're going to need to create our small and medium and big cogs. And we're going to do so by duplicating this gun template. But there's some key things that I've already changed on here that I did before for the random prize generator. Most notably, within here, if we look at the pickup spawner script section, then you'll see that respawning is unchecked, spawn time min and max is set to 0, show on init is ticked. So with those things already done on this gun template, we can actually just duplicate the gun template from our library, right click, duplicate, and put in medium cog. If I then open my medium cog within here, there's only a few things that we need to do here. So the first thing is change this to medium cog and change the mesh asset to, let's put in gear, and it's gear bevel spur medium. That's the one. And if we scroll down in here, we'll change the friendly name to medium cog. We'll change the pickup sound to the metal gate closing sound. That sound, which I think is quite nice for picking up a metal cog. These are already all correct. I think that's everything we need to do for the medium cog. And I've already done this for the little cog and for the big cog too. So we've got our 3 templates of small, medium and large. Essentially, they're the same as the gun template, but with some minor tweaks. Oh, one more thing that you will need to do is probably stop it from shooting unless it's a gun that you're doing. So I'm going to just get rid of the gun script completely. And probably the iron sight script too. So now it doesn't have those scripts attached. We won't be able to shoot our cog, which is probably a good thing. The next thing we need to do is, rather than the spawning the assault rifle over here at the collection point, let's change it so it spawns our medium cog. Let's just test that and run it. So preview the game, let's run up to the machine, interact with the machine, and now it's spawning our medium-sized cog. And even though the rifle grip is meant for a rifle, I actually think it sort of nearly works with the medium-sized cog, so I'm going to leave that. Okay, so we're now spawning a medium-sized cog on the locator over here. So the next step that we need to cover is essentially taking a little cog from the player's inventory. So let's have a look at some of the logic that we've got at the moment. This is the crafting terminal, and when you interact with this, it essentially runs the Embiggen function from the Embiggen script. Let's take a look at the Embiggen script. Here's the Embiggen function, and what it's doing is it's playing a sound, and then it's calling the spawn item function. The spawn item function spawns whatever template we reference in the return item property. It spawns that at the location of the spawn locator property. And if we look at the entity editor over here, I've set the return item to medium cog, and the spawn locator is set to locator 3, which we can see is over there on the collection point. So that's where we're at with the logic so far. What we need to do is take some of the logic that we had from our simple, our random prize generator, and use it to take away the little cog from our player's inventory as payment for the medium-sized cog. So essentially we don't need to make our cog move through this machine, although that's totally doable and something that you can do if you've got the time to do that. We don't need to do that though. We can just make it feel like that's what's going on with this massive machine or selection of machines. If I wanted to go one step further, I could probably do something like turn this one on, then turn it off and turn this one on, then turn that off, then turn this one on, and so on. So it feels like it's going around our machines. But all I'm going to do is just take away the little cog and then spawn a medium-sized cog over here at the collection point. So let's get hold of the logic. Now, I'm going to use the same logic we used for the random prize generator. And if we have a look at that, here we have the part of the code where we got hold of the player's inventory. When they interacted with the random prize generator, we get a reference to their inventory, and then we check that they had enough currency, and at the same time remove a certain amount of currency from their inventory. And then we use a conditional to say, did they have enough currency? If so, spawn an item. And that was when we did the randomized mesh spawning part. And we already have kind of got that covered with what we're doing at the moment. But what we don't have is this inventory stuff here. So I'm going to take these two lines of code and put them in my Embiggen script in the Embiggen function. So I'm just going to put them here in a really similar place to where we did the activate function. We're now in this Embiggen function, which is essentially doing the same sort of thing. So we're going to need to get hold of the inventory. So that's going to stay the same. But this line of code, line 17 here, that needs some changes because we're not taking a currency of like 5 coins or 20 doubloons or whatever. We're not taking currency. We're taking an item from the player's inventory and making it look like we're turning it into something bigger. So the amount of things is reducing rather than being a variable property that we can set in the properties up here called cost. We're actually just going to take one thing from their inventory. So I'm going to put a 1 there. And notice that this is referencing a currency. And that's because the prize generator had a currency property that we were setting to whatever the game currency was. We're not going to have that. We're going to instead add something, create a new reference to the type of thing that we want to accept as payment. So accepted item rather than currency. And the type will be a template. Same as currency was, but we're using a slightly different name because it's slightly different semantics here. So let's take that accepted item and replace currency with accepted item. Let's change this variable name to has accepted item. We're just changing the code, so it's not actually changing the functionality all that much. All it's doing is it's becoming a bit of a different description for us as coders, so that when we come back to this, it makes a bit more sense, and it's not just using names of things that don't make any sense in this situation. So has accepted item will essentially store true or false. It will store true if the player has at least one of the accepted items in their inventory. It will return false if they don't have any. If we look at the random prize generator script, we then checked that this true or false here. So this is a variable. We checked that using a condition. So we said if that variable was true, then spawn an item. And we need to do the same piece of logic in our code here. So if has accepted item, then, and we don't need to say if it's equal to true, because it's a given that if we're checking a Boolean like has accepted item, which can only be true or false, that if it's true, then it will run these lines of code straight after the then, and if it's false, it won't. We have to make sure that we end, wherever we have an if statement like this, we have to make sure we end it with an end declaration like that. So if has accepted item, play sound, and spawn item, which runs this function here. So the last thing we need to do before this will work is click on our crafting terminal and make sure in our Embiggen script that we've set the accepted item property that we created. And I'm going to change that to be the little cog. So notice I've got the accepted item as the little cog and the return item as the medium cog. That means in my game, I need some way of either picking up or automatically already having a little cog in my inventory. If you like, you can just add a little cog into your game world. Let's preview this, press F5 to run it. Go and collect the little cog. So now holding that, walk up to the machine, press E to embiggen, it gets rid of the little cog and it spawns a medium-sized cog over here. Notice when I try and run the machine again with only a medium-sized cog, it isn't actually spawning anything over here. One thing I noticed there was my medium cog, it has an assault rifle as its icon asset, which isn't ideal. So make sure that you go ahead and sort that out and make sure it's the right thing. Yeah, the icon asset for little cog is fine. And the icon asset for big cog is also fine. So that was one property that we didn't correctly identify as needing to change. Okay, so we have the same sort of logic that we have for our simple prize script, but instead of that, we are just taking one item from our player inventory. The great thing about doing it this way and having our Embiggen script like this is that now, rather than me having to code lots of specific use cases and ifs and all that sort of stuff in here to make it a machine which can embiggen anything, I can actually just add the same script to the machine. So let's add another version of Embiggen script. So we've got two Embiggen scripts now. And let's also make sure that we call the other one. Oh, I don't think we need to do that actually, because it will automatically call the other one. Yeah. Okay, so you don't need to set up another one. So we've got two Embiggen scripts attached to this entity. And let's just set up so that we can turn a medium cog. Let's set this accepted item of medium cog to big cog as the return item. Spawn location can be, again, locator 3. Prompt message, again, Embiggen. And the craft sound, you could make it a different sound for each one. I'm going to make it the same. So now if I preview the game, and just wait for the assets to come in, there we go. So let's pick up the little cog and then use the machine to embiggen the little cog and make it into a medium-sized cog. And let's use the machine again to make the medium-sized cog into a large cog. So my machine is working, it's making things bigger, and I can keep adding more things to it that I want to make bigger. For example, I could take a small sandwich and turn it into a jumbo sandwich, a small spoon and turn it into a jumbo spoon. It's also worth maybe adding a little bit of UI to the game world so that you're describing exactly what happens to the player. So here I'm just going to set my UI so that it's showing the player that they can make things bigger and what things the Embigginator accepts. You could also further develop this so that it takes a cost. So as well as the cog, it also requires a certain amount of currency. And that's really starting to move towards the crafting table thing that we're going to be looking at in a tutorial that's coming up. So this Embigginator is kind of taking the same logic as the random prize generator and turning it around a little bit so that it's, instead of generating something completely random, it's taking one thing and making it bigger. Another thing that would be really nice to do here is make sure these machines were all turned off and then turn them on one by one in sort of depicting the process of something going through each one. I'll leave that for you to do. I hope this tutorial has been helpful and useful and interesting. If you get stuck, head over to the Discord and hit up the Ask Anything channel or the Lua Help channel if you're stuck on something in particular to do with Lua. You feel free to @me because I'm more than happy to jump in and help where I can. And I really look forward to seeing what you do with the Embigginator in Crayta.